Hey, I'm Ton Vin, and this is Seattle Eats. Chances are you've seen many food vendors popping up around Seattle. Carts selling hot dogs outside a Seahawks game, or a taco truck in your hood opening on weekends. Turns out, many of these vendors are skirting the law. Today, we're going to talk about how illegal pop-ups are thriving in Seattle and how to spot them so that you know the street food you're eating is safe. And later, we'll talk about some of the best tacos in the city hidden inside a brewery. So let's get to it. We're going to start this episode with a story. This past summer, I started hearing about a taco truck that people told me was just amazing. It was called Tacos La Cuadra. I heard they were setting up outside an AutoZone on Rainier Avenue and at a few other locations around the city. So I went down to Rainier Beach to find them, and it didn't take long. I saw a line of people 2 blocks long waiting at the food truck. Next to it was a pop-up canopy and some fold-out tables. But the star was the Al Pastor. It's a beehive-shaped hunk of pork on a vertical spit right next to the sidewalk. It's being cooked by an open fire, and you can hear the sizzle of the pork fat and the smell. It was one of the great smells in food. It's sort of like when you walk by a pizzeria and you can smell that pepperoni pizza. You know, smoky, fatty, delicious. I waited 45 minutes in line. And when I got to the front, I discovered they don't take cards. Only cash or Venmo. So I handed them a stack of ones. I watched them prepare a taco for me. First, the cook took rendered fat from the pork and used it to heat up the tortilla. And then they carved the meat right off the spit onto the tortilla. And the only topping were shards of pineapple. I ate it right there on the sidewalk. And guys, let me tell you, it was as good as advertised. The pork was nicely charred on the outside, the edges all lacy, and it was juicy on the inside. This was one of the best pork tacos I've had in the United States, right up there with the ones I've had in L.A. and Austin, Texas. I went back again for seconds, and I said, I'm going to write about this place. So like any reporter, I started asking questions. Like, hey, when did you guys start? How long have you guys been in business? But I didn't get any answers. One employee said, I don't speak English. And then I saw him turn around and speak English to another person. I'm like, that's strange. Normally people are excited when you write about their food. So I moved on to the next step when I'm covering a business. I looked up their license. And you know what? There was no license. So I called the King County Health Department. And I asked them about Tacos La Cuadra. Oh yeah, they knew all about them. Turns out, the health department had tried to shut down Tacos La Cuadra 5 times because they didn't have a health permit. That means they could be breaking safety rules, like storing food at the right temperature and having a place for employees to wash hands. But La Cuadra kept coming back and opening again and again. I'm like, how is this possible? Because any other restaurant, if you get shut down, it's bad publicity. Most never recover from it. But Tacos La Cuadra was still the hottest food truck of the summer. Arguably, the hottest restaurant all summer. Taco La Cuadra finally decided to play ball and got its health permit last month. But the health department told me they're just the tip of the iceberg. So, how big is this problem of vendors dodging health rules? And how can you tell if the food truck you're standing in line for is safe? All good questions that need a good reporter to investigate. But I was about to head out of the country for a 2-week food tour in Colombia. I passed the story on to my colleague at the Seattle Times, Jackie Varriano. Jackie is here to tell me what she found out and to talk about the food vendors that fly under the radar. Hi, Jackie. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Ton. Glad to be here.
I was so sad to leave this story, but you dug into it while I was gone. So I'm curious about what you found. How many illegal vendors are there around the city?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thanks for going on vacation because I didn't know how deep this story was going to run until you left because we thought it was maybe just one, right? And then we come to find out that now, up until Halloween, the city has shut down 98 unpermitted vendors this year, which is more than in the past 5 years combined.
That's a staggering figure because if you think about it, because these unpermitted vendors, they're really hard to track down. And in talking to the health department, they can't get a sense how big this problem is because it's not on record as, as being a legal business. Give me some examples of some of the places where these trucks and mobile units are skirting the rules.
Well, there are a lot of places that you would think in front of Lumen Field or T-Mobile Park right before games or concerts. But then they're also just kind of in the University District or Capitol Hill, anywhere that large groups of people are gathering. Predictably, they're also going to be.
So tell me, what do you see when you drive past and see these vendors? What are they selling? What are they doing?
Well, I think that's also something that makes it difficult is because if you're thinking about something in front of Lumen Field where there's going to be 55,000 people walking across, these kinds of unpermitted vendors are like very minimal carts, often duct taped together. It does not look very legit. But if you're going into some place that is more outside of a farmer's market, say, or even in like a parking lot of an auto parts store, that could look almost exactly the same as a regular permitted business. Or maybe it's somebody that is selling tamales out of the back of their van. I mean, it's just like so many different things. It also makes it difficult to discern who is illegal and who is not.
And why is this getting more common?
Great question. I would also love to know that because it doesn't seem like Seattle is the only city who's dealing with this. When I talked to the health department, they said that they've seen other health departments across the country in states like Arizona, California, Texas. They're all experiencing this great rise in unpermitted mobile vendors. And I think if we look at what's been going on around the country, especially since COVID, is there's lots of inflation. There's lots of people struggling, just trying to survive, trying to make a living. And I think when we look at the repercussions of having and operating something like an illegal food stand and how it doesn't really seem to be it doesn't seem to be too bad to run one and to get it shut down. This seems just like a very easy way for people to just eke out a living.
You just said there's not really any downsides. So what happens if you get caught?
I mean, not much. I think they pretty much tell you to shut it down for the day and then you live to see the next event and open up.
Yeah. And we found this, didn't we, Jackie, where when at the bar park, a food inspector would just shut you down. Mm-hmm. And what they do is, one, they just wait till the food inspector leaves that block and they just reopens.
And just reopen. Yeah, because it's also very difficult for a food inspector to throw away product. They have to have physically laid eyes on a reason that this food is not safe to sell.
And I think the point that a lot of people are making is these carts don't get confiscated.
Not at all. The health department is saying their main goal is education. They want to bring people into compliance, and they don't want to do it by fining people, shutting them down, confiscating their product or their carts.
Wait, they don't get fined?
No, they don't get fined.
It's funny because La Quadra is like this. It's a cat and mouse game because you get shut down, they just reappear.
Yeah. Next day, next time. Like there's no normal business hours unless that food inspector is on La Quadra's Instagram, which is maybe why they got shut down 5 times. They could always find them.
Exactly. We shouldn't laugh about this, but it was just hilarious. La Quadra was like one of the worst kept secrets.
Yes, exactly. And they were not fined. None of their product got thrown away. It was just like, fellas, lock it up. That's it. And then the next day there'd be more tacos for all of us.
The next day it was like, ta-da, we're back. I think when the public think about this, they're thinking, well, why don't they just get a permit? Tell me, what is the process if someone wants to open a food cart or truck legally?
I think a lot of it starts just like opening a real restaurant, right? What are you going to serve? So based on what you're going to serve, that's going to tell you what kind of cart you need. Do you just need like a little hot dog cart? Do you need something that has a grill or a hood or an oven? And then once you figure out that and how much money that is going to cost you, then you're on to how much money you're going to need for permits and where you're going to set up and all of those things. So it all starts with what you're going to serve and how risky the health department determines that risk is.
And how much does this all cost for a food vendor who wants to start up?
Yeah, that determines on the risk level as well. So something like a hot dog cart is just under $600 for that permit. And then something that is maybe selling like a deli sandwich or something, that would be a risk too. And that is $887. And then a full-on cart, like you're getting a pizza, you're getting a gyro, that is over $1,100 for that permit.
And this does not include other costs, and that is lease,
Yep.
rent for a commissary kitchen, which they have to have.
Yeah, because the commissary kitchen is also a place of safety, right? It's where you can make your food safely, where you can wash your hands, where you can store things properly, a safe place to park your truck overnight to make sure it's not being tampered with. And then you also have to see where you're parking it. Is it something that you need a permit from the city to park? Is it something you need to ask a business owner? Is the place zoned for a food truck? Yeah, it's lots of stuff.
We're talking thousands of dollars, easily over $5,000.
Oh, yeah, on a yearly basis that you have to continuously pay.
Yeah. And I think the point that the health department is trying to make is not so much the permits, but safety. Isn't that what's concerned?
Yes. So the risk is what kind of food? Is it going through a bunch of temperature shifts? Is it hot soup that's being kept hot for a long time? Is it meat that's going from a raw to a cooked state? Is there a place off-site that you need to prepare this food where you need a commissary kitchen and the only thing on your cart is you're just handing out bagels? Or is it something that is much more involved?
I've talked to vendors that run these carts and food trucks legally, and this is really frustrating to them. Jackie, what did you hear from these vendors who are following the rules?
Oh, well, they're mad. I think they're super mad because they're trying to do everything right. I mean, how many stories have you and I worked on where we're talking about how difficult it is to run a restaurant this year? And that's like a full brick and mortar restaurant. Now you take a hot dog vendor that has 3 hours maybe once a week to make their business work, and they've got somebody setting up in front of them unpermitted, totally undercutting their business. It's just incredible how difficult it is.
One of the people you interviewed I thought was fascinating, Jackie Varriano. Tell me about him. What do you know about him?
Well, he's kind of one of these guys that is an old school hot dog vendor, if you could be an old school hot dog vendor. He's had one near the stadiums for 26 years, and then he just kind of started growing his empire. He added a burger cart about 15 years ago and then added a bar. He has seen the stadium be renamed like 10 times. He's seen streets be renamed, and he's still just like slinging $5 hot dogs.
So he's been through it all. So he's seen these ballparks before these illegal vendors even popped up. So tell me, what are some of the things he's seen in the last 2 years?
He is seeing basically a moving van show up, a bunch of carts be deployed. They're wrapping raw bacon around hot dogs with their hands. They're setting up right in front of him and just being kind of intimidating, I think.
And it's not that just parking in front of him, but they're parking along the sidewalks, on the sidewalk, in front of the gate.
In front of the gate, yeah. He had said, if somebody walks past his cart on the way out of the stadium and don't buy anything, like there's nothing he can do about it. He's already lost them. But if they're coming in and they're going to these people instead of going to him, that is undercutting his business 100%.
And I think the other problem that he mentioned to me and to you is the tension are high because there's so much more competition. In one instance, he was telling us, Jackie, that there was an illegal food cart parked in front of a food truck. And that food truck employee got so mad, he just kicked it over.
Yeah, he just kicked it over. I just don't know what I would do if I saw that in front of me. Probably not get a hot dog, though.
And I think that's an example where tension is really high now.
Yeah.
Because I remember going to the Seahawks game last year, and even the previous season, there weren't as many. Whereas this year, they're just lining along the streets, and there's so much tension. You see yelling and screaming. And
oh, yeah. Varriano said that his son works at one of the carts, and one of the illegal vendors did a throat cutting motion across, to his son. That just seems intense.
We laugh, but this is people's livelihoods.
Exactly.
Right. There was a lot at stake. And I think we've reached a point now where the health department has had enough. And they've taken a more aggressive stance that I've seen in the past. One, they put out a public service announcement with guidelines on how to identify these illegal vendors. They have told me that they have increased patrol in problem areas like the U District and Capitol Hill and all the games and the concerts at Climate Pledge Arena to crack down on these illegal vendors. It's so hard, I think, for the public, from the public's perspective. How do you tell the difference between a legal vendor and an illegal vendor?
Well, I think the duct tape is a big indicator, but also how are they handling money? How are they handling the food? Do they look like they're using gloves? Do they have a sticker that says that it's been inspected this year? I mean, starting January 1st, all those little smiley faces that we see in brick and mortar restaurants are going to be posted on any mobile food cart that's been inspected. It's a pretty visible, recognizable symbol that something is legit.
Yeah, and I think one of the points that the health department made is look for a sink with some buckets, literally, quote, buckets of water.
Buckets of water that they have a hand washing station.
And to me, I think it's even more common sense than that. I think it was Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart who said, when asked, how did you define obscenity? His response was, I know it when I see it.
Yes. Am I going to eat there? I'll decide when I get there.
And yeah, I think it's that black and white. Because I went to a Seahawks game last year, Jackie, and I was going to buy hot dog from this one vendor, and I saw he wrapped the raw bacon around the hot dog, and he used the same hand to take cash and give change. And
no, that's a no for me.
Yeah. And when you talked to Farshid, he made an interesting point, because this is not just about getting the correct permits. So tell me, why is he so worried about that in terms of repercussions?
It affects everyone that's doing it legal, because the headline is just going to read, in his mind, stadium hot dog vendor sickens hundreds or whatever. And then he's thinking of all the previous situations where a company or a restaurant has dealt with a foodborne illness and how tough it is to come back from that.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, his margins are pretty thin. You got to sell a lot of $5 hot dogs to make money. And as a hot dog cart, he's not a brick and mortar restaurant that has consistent business. He can't just open up the next day and expect to make that money back. He has 2 hours.
Exactly.
And that's it.
And if it's the Seahawks, it's just one game a week.
It's one game a week.
And if you're lucky, and I don't think the Seahawks are lucky, they won't be in the playoffs, so it's even fewer home games.
It's just even fewer. Right? Maybe he needs to get a line to Geno Smith or something and see.
Well, Jackie, thanks for reporting on this story. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Stick around for our tip of the week. We'll talk more about Al Pastor tacos, including some of the best spots for it. That's coming right up. It's time for a tip of the week. See How Eats producer Claire McGrain is here. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Ton.
Earlier, I talked to Jackie about Tacos La Cuadra and their Al Pastor tacos, which are now legal and above board, I might add. So that's my tip of the week. I hate to say something as trite as Al Pastor is having a moment, but Claire, it's having a moment, at least in Seattle.
I am so glad we're talking about this because there's actually a La Cuadra location at a different place on Rainier than the one you went to that I drive by all the time, and I see that like spit, the turning spit of meat, and I really want to know where that comes from because it's so unique.
Yeah. Listeners might be surprised to know that Al Pastor has its genesis in the Middle East. Lebanese who immigrated to Mexico like a century ago introduced shawarma, or these lamb meat roasted on a vertical spit. And that has evolved into Al Pastor, Claire. So instead of lamb meat, it's pork shoulder on the spit. Instead of serving it in a folded pita bread, it's on a corn tortilla. So next time you see a, doner kebab or a gyro and Al Pastor, know that's all coming from the same family tree. For me, mind blown.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the meat. And something else you mentioned about your taco at La Cuadra was that all that came on it other than the meat was pineapple. Is that normal? Like, what's the normal toppings for a taco like this?
This gets a little bit controversial for a lot of people.
Great.
Like, to each his own, right? You can put whatever you want on it. But for me, when I've had it in Mexico and I had it in L.A., all it is people usually put a modicum of maybe raw onions and a little cilantro, and that's it. But I realize now that Americans top their Apple Store tacos, shall we say, differently? What I mean by that is it's a complimentary salsa bar, right? And people take advantage of it. They just load up their tacos with like tons of jalapeno peppers and salsa sauce and onions to a point where I would say it's more of a taco salad. And to each his own, right? But if you want really good Apple Store tacos, the star is the meat. And all these other components, onions and cilantros, are the backup singer. Think of it that way. So you don't want to put a lot of onions and cilantros and salsa, even hot sauce, onto these Apple Store tacos. And if you're going to do that, if you're just going to overload it with a lot of condiments and hot sauce and so forth, you don't need to stand in line for 45 minutes at this food truck because you can really get it anywhere.
Yeah.
And you can get these free salsa bars anywhere and just fill it up. Save you a lot of time.
You know what this is reminding me of is on the Great British Bake Off, when one of the contestants does a very simple dish, the judges are always really harsh on like, is it good quality? And then if you go all out, you know, they're a little less discerning about, is everything perfect? So this is kind of, it feels like Tacos La Cuadra, their thing is very simple but really high quality al pastor. But we've been talking about La Cuadra a lot, and you said there's a lot of places in Seattle that do this. So tell us about some other ones.
I would say the hottest spot now, it's in the Ballard Brewery District, of all places. It's inside Fair Isle Brewing, and it's this chef from L.A. His name is Bo Tarantine, and he has worked at 2 Michelin star restaurants in California. And he settled here with his girlfriend. And every Sunday through Tuesday, he makes these Apple Store-like tacos. And for the purists, it's not seasoned like your typical Apple Store tacos. I would say his has a more fall spice note to it. It's more cinnamon-y. Mm-hmm. He used guacamole, which isn't in the traditional Apple Store tacos. But I think they do some of the best Apple Store tacos right now. And it's served on a house-made or handmade tortilla. So you get this rich, cornmeal-y, custardy taste. It costs $3.50, Clara, but it's really, for Ballard, it should cost $5 or $6 per taco. And the reason why he can make this work is because he doesn't have some of the same constraints as other restaurants. One, it's just him and his girlfriend, so they don't have to deal with the labor shortage or pay other people. And two, it's open inside Fair Isle Brewing, so he doesn't have to worry about the full cost of rent, of running a business. Mm-hmm. And that's why you can get these pretty much gourmet tacos for under $4. And I know what listeners are saying. They're saying, hey, but this taco truck has tacos for $1.50. But 2 things about that. 1, those are much smaller tacos. And 2, everything is pre-made and they just pretty much just heat it up for you. And it doesn't taste the same as these that are served by Chef Bo Tarantine at Ballard.
So you want it like freshly made. That's when it's going to be at its best.
Yeah. And I would say at La Cuadra, which is a place where everyone goes now, they have the same problem, or not the same problem, but the same challenge. Because the best time to eat at La Cuadra in any place to sell these things is you actually want it when it's packed. When there's no line, these guys have nothing to do. So what they do is they shave these meat and they put them in a bin. And it just sits around. It dries out. It's not as good. And that's the beauty of this place at Fair Isle Brewing. It's like it's made to order. He shaves it off and he makes your tortilla. It's really, I would say, the best taco right now in Seattle.
That sounds really good. Also, I feel like having a taco place inside a brewery makes so much sense. Like, that is a beer food in my mind.
Right. And I think you're going to see this trend more in the future.
So that leads me to another question, which is something I hear all the time from my friends who moved here from California or Arizona. Seattle does not have good Mexican or Tex-Mex food. Is that changing?
I think it's changing slowly or gradually because nothing really happens overnight. Last year when I did my 500 taco project, I noticed that, there are really good tacos now that you didn't see pop up before. And I realized the ones that made my cut for best tacos in Western Washington, they were the ones that opened within a year or 2. They weren't business that were around for 5 or 10 years, but newcomers mostly. So the problem is you have these LA transplant. They'll compare to like the LA scene. So we pale in comparison to LA, but we're finding our own rhythm. And I think Apple Store is a perfect example of that.
I think it's so funny that the chef you talked about literally moved here from California and went from working in a Michelin star restaurant to being like the side hustle for a brewery.
Yeah, that's right. He worked at 2 Michelin star restaurants. And I think you're going to see a lot of the people do what he does, which is run a pop-up. Because we have a problem here in Seattle. I'm sure everyone realized, hey, food inflation, labor shortage. And so you have these big-name chefs who figure out a way to do this, and that is you just rent out a spot inside an existing restaurant. You don't use a staff. You use your family, which is what he does, his girlfriend.
Or like the best pizza in Seattle, according to Seattle Times readers and writers, Stevie's Famous. They are in the clock out lounge space when there aren't music performances there.
Exactly. And you're going to see a lot of these joint partnership in the coming years, especially for brewery. I give the breweries credit. They're the ones who have led this charge, especially around ballot, and people have figured it out. Oh, it's really expensive to run your own restaurants. Rely on food truck or rent out your space and have a chef, or in this case, a Michelin star cook, take over your kitchen.
Well, Ton, thanks for answering all my questions as usual.
Claire, I'm always up to talk about tacos. Anytime, any day, any night.
Okay, I'm calling you next time I'm making tacos for dinner then, because I could use some help.
Let's do it. That's a wrap. A reminder that we have a list of spots we recommended today in the description of this episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Seattle Eats is a production of the Seattle Times and KUOW, part of the NPR network. You can support Seattle Eats by investing in the local newsroom and the specialized beats that make this sort of storytelling possible. Please consider joining and subscribing at kuow.org/eats and seattletimes.com. Seattle Eats is produced by Claire McGrain and edited by Jim Gates and Trevor Lensmeyer. I'm Ton Venn. Catch you next time.